I am Haley Daniels, and this is my project two, the physics of climate change. It is a known fact that seasons come and go. Along with each new season, we expect different temperatures. For instance, when the wintertime is quickly approaching, we pull out our scarves, our sweaters, our boots because we predict that the temperatures will be lower than they were in the fall and the spring. When summer is quickly approaching, we get ready to buy our flip flops, our t shirts, and our shorts because, along with each new season, we expect the temperatures to change. Although the temperatures can change, we must also be prepared that seasons may not directly correlate with the temperature that we expect to receive. For instance, in December of the past year, 2018, Tennessee received very odd temperatures to me. I remember during the Christmas day, I was walking outside with flip flops on to my car, and it was like it was the springtime. It was no different, but I expected in my mind that we would experience a snowy Christmas or temperatures that were in the 20s or the 30s, but instead we received temperatures that were in the 50s and 60s pretty much most of the December winter months. The seasons are kind of like a clock. With each new season, we expect it to change, but we also must be prepared for them not to change, which brings me into my topic of climate change. Climate change is a change in the rise of global temperatures. It is caused by different factors and it refers to a shift in the climate that affects the globe. I know that sometimes weather and climate can be used interchangeably, but there are key differences. Climate change is very important to us and our society as it affects our food. Climate change affects our agriculture, our resources, and our health. After various studies and trends of climate, it has been said that the change in our climate is rising at a rate that we have never seen before. We are now in the year 2019. But even if we look at the graph here, this was between the years of 1880 and 2000. And as you can see, as the years progress, the rise in global temperature increased dramatically. So just imagine where we are now and where our climate change will be in the future. Two of the major factors of climate change that we're going to talk about today are light and heat. Light is a major utility that we all need. If we look at our cars use lights. At night, our cars have headlights that help us with navigation on the road. And even when we get in our car at night, we have lights that come on. We use lights in our home pretty much every day and all day. When we come home and we put our bags down, we most likely turn a light on in order to see around our house, especially for those who live alone. It's like one of the first things that we do. And light poles. I also thought about light poles in terms of when we travel outside, when we are traveling, it is good for direction. I also remember when I was riding down the street one day and there was a power outage and the light poles were off. And that's what actually allowed me to think about integrating light poles into this PowerPoint today. Because although that power outage was out, it seems so odd, but we rely on light so much and we don't even realize it. But one of the greatest sources of light for our Earth is the sun. The sun is significant for our survival. I have often heard that if we were positioned too close to the sun, we would be in danger of burning up because we know that the sun is extremely hot. Although we don't receive the heat directly on us, we know that it is hot. But if we were positioned too far from the sun, we will be in danger of freezing. So we are just at that right spot that we are able to receive the heat and what we need from the sun. I also think about heat. We know that the summer months are approaching, and I often hear people say that the heat is such a drainer in the summer because it is. When we've been used to the winter and we transition into spring, We most likely are not used to 190-degree weather. I even think about last week. The weather has been changing drastically. We were in the 80s last week, and I was just like, wow. But the heat is something that we need for our earth, even though sometimes it can annoy us because the temperatures are so high. It is still needed in our earth. Heat is also generated by various objects that we use daily, and we may not even know it, such as our cell phones, our computers, and our hands. When a warm temperature is emitted, infrared radiation is caused. And so here is a picture of the infrared that shows levels of infrared radiation. So this picture included an activity that showed when you hold the palm of your hand between your ear and your eye, it allows your hand to feel the heat that is radiating from your head. And you can see the different hot spots that are on the man's hand in the picture, which showing that when warm temperatures are emitted, infrared radiation is caused. Now, how does this relate to the physics of climate change in terms of heat? One of the main reasons heat is a major factor of climate change is due to its interaction with greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases such as CO2 and nitrogen oxide trap heat in the atmosphere, which is known as the greenhouse effect. When infrared radiation interacts with those greenhouse gases, it causes a vibration of CO2 molecules and some heat is sent to Earth. When carbon dioxide is pumped into the atmosphere, climate change is caused. This picture here just shows a picture of the greenhouse effect, and I just want to hit back on what the greenhouse effect was. So, when greenhouse gases such as CO2, nitrogen oxide, and water vapor, those are examples of greenhouse gases, when they trap heat in the atmosphere, this is known as the greenhouse effect. And so here we can see that we have some solar radiation reflected by the Earth and the atmosphere. We see that the sun, the heat and the light from the sun is affecting the Earth's surface and atmosphere. Infrared radiation is emitted by the Earth's surface. Most of the radiation is absorbed by the Earth's surface and warms it. And then a little portion here says some of the infrared radiation passes through the atmosphere. Some is absorbed and re-emitted in all directions by greenhouse gas molecules. The effect of this is to warm the Earth's surface and the lower temperature. So, as an effect of the light and the heat from the sun, the Earth's surface and the lower temperature of the Earth are warmed. Physics of climate change in terms of light. Before studying this, I never knew that even the lights in my home affect climate change. The sun is also a major factor as well. Isaac Newton was responsible for the particle theory of light, which explained that light was made of particles, which later led to the laws of refraction and reflection. So Isaac Newton is one of the guys that we need to give major credit to when we understand more about the properties of light. We also know that light has properties of reflection, refraction, diffraction, and dispersion. Visible light, infrared light, which we talked about a little earlier, and ultraviolet light are emitted by the sun. These are three forms of light of the electromagnetic spectrum. We know that radio waves and microwaves are also included, but we're just hitting on the three forms of light that are emitted by the sun. The energy emitted from the sun is although mostly used through visible light. So most of the light that is emitted by the sun is through visible light, which is light that we can see. When I grew up, or just growing up, I always heard adults, whether I was with my parents or I was at a friend's house, they would always say, turn the lights off. And I never truly understood why they were so worried about the lights being on. And as I grew up, I became conscious of the fact that they wanted to have lower electricity bills, which I was young. And as I've grown older, I've noticed that when you are a kid and a teenager, you don't really pay attention to things like that because it's not directly affecting you. But I always heard them saying to turn the lights off when I was growing up. But also, turning the lights off will affect our climate change in a positive way. So not only is it good for decreasing your electricity bill, but the physics of climate change in terms of light, by turning off the lights, we are positively impacting the rise of climate change. Because when electricity is generated, fossil fuels are burned, which causes the byproducts of greenhouse gases such as nitrogen oxide and carbon dioxide to be produced. These greenhouse gases result in changed weather patterns, rise of temperatures, and air pollution. So just when we come in the house and we turn a light on, electricity has to be generated. When that electricity is generated, fossil fuels are burned, which allows greenhouse gases to be produced. When these greenhouse gases are emitted into our atmosphere, that is a part of the result of why our weather patterns are changed, why we have air pollution and smog in our air, and also the rise of temperatures are all due to some of the greenhouse gases that are in our atmosphere. So this is just a small portion of why the physics of climate change in terms of light, why it affects climate change. Why does light affect climate change? Changing the rise of climate change. Although we cannot directly go and change the way the sun radiates its amount of heat and the way that it is reflected back to the earth, there are small amounts and small things, small changes that we can make in order to change the rise of climate change. One tip that we can take from this presentation today is that when we are not in a room, just simply turn the lights off. I never noticed until I did my research on climate change how often I'm keeping the lights on when I'm not even in the rooms. And sometimes I will go in the kitchen or go in the restroom and you keep the light on, not remembering and not realizing how it is affecting our climate, how it is affecting our globe. So one thing we can do is just turn the lights off when we're not in the room. Not only will we be decreasing electricity bills, but we are making small changes that will make a difference in our future. When we reduce electricity use, we are also reducing the amount of electricity that has to be generated by power plants, and thereby changing the rise of climate change. As I go and leave the physics class, when we are done with this physics class, I will make sure that I take this with me. I will take this tip with me in order to make an impact in society. I have realized that no matter how small or big a change is, changes are changes, and changes are changes that need to be made in our society in order to better ourselves, in order to better our globe, our cities, and our community. Just one small change is enough to impact the future of us all. I am Haley Daniels, and this is my project, The Physics of Climate Change. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.